I mean, best of the best. Frank Zappa was one. Frank Zappa could direct the Philharmonic Orchestra because he knew more about music than anybody on rock and roll. Brian Wilson. And we're sitting after the Grammys one night, and it's Iggy, myself, John, it's everybody sitting there. And I hear, psst, Alice. And I look around, and it's Brian Wilson. I went, hey, Brian. And he says, I go over and he says, introduce me to John Lennon. And I know what these guys have met before. I mean, they've talked about, the Beatles talked about how they wouldn't have done Sgt. Pepper had they not heard Pet Sounds. So I went, okay. John, this is Brian Wilson. And John looks at me and he goes, oh, hello, Brian, how are you? Good to see you. He says, I've been a big fan all your life. Oh, thank you. He leaves. About half an hour later, psst, Bernie. And Bernie Taupin was sitting there. Introduce me to John Lennon. Bernie looks at me over. He says, John, he says, this is Bernie, this is Brian Wilson. And John goes, oh, hello, Brian. And as soon as he leaves, he looks at me and he says, he's not well,